All right, welcome to our video on overview of statistics. This will be our first video for the course. And in this video, we're going to look at identifying populations and samples. So what exactly is statistics? What have you signed up for? What are you getting yourself into? Statistics, as a loose definition, is a process of obtaining, organizing, summarizing, interpreting, and drawing conclusions based on observable values called data. So, statistics and statisticians gather information, they obtain the information, the data, they organize it, they summarize it, which we'll spend some time looking at that as well. And organizing as well oftentimes involves things like making charts or visual displays, things like that. Interpreting the results and drawing conclusions based on those results. So typically, statisticians are going to gather samples of data to help draw conclusions about the data's population. Well, what's a population? What's a sample? Well, population, much like a country's population, is composed of all the entities or data values that are to be observed. So the information that we obtain from a population is referred to as a parameter. So throughout the course, we'll be looking at things like mean and as a median as well, measures of spread of data like standard deviation. And when you get the information and perform those calculations from the population, they're called parameters. Versus a sample, in which a sample is a subgroup or a subset of the population, and the information we get from a sample is referred to as a statistic. So the process of statistics is to take samples of a population and then try to get information about the population based on the samples that you take. And a sample that you take from a population should be a good representation of that population and should be big enough to include a variety of observations. So, for instance, if we take a look at this diagram here, this green oval represents a population. A sample would be a subset or a subgroup of this population. Now, we wouldn't want to take a sample of something that's not in the population. So, for instance, if we're looking at a population of, um, 2015 Ford F-150 trucks, we wouldn't want our sample to include something like maybe a Dodge Charger or something like that. So we'd want to make sure our sample is a good representation of our population. And we want to make sure our sample's big enough to get valid information about the population. We wouldn't want a large population and only take a sample of a couple individuals within the population. So the better we can get this circle to be as large as this population circle, the better our results are going to be. So again, we want this sample to be completely within this circle. So we don't want anything outside the population to be included in our sample, and we want to try to get this as good as a representation of the population as we possibly can. So example 1, we're going to identify the population in the sample for each of the following. So example 1A, we have 100 people at the mall are surveyed as to whether or not they like the mall, which I don't know if you're still watching this, if malls will still be a thing, but if not, they used to be places where people shopped and gathered. Well, our population is going to be everyone at the mall, probably everybody at the mall that day, or maybe everybody at the mall during the time that they were getting this survey done. So the population is everybody at the mall, which, again, depending on the state of malls, by the time you watch this video, you usually had a wide representation of various people at the mall. So, you had young, you had old, you had just about everybody in between. So it was a pretty good population to take samples from. And in this case, the sample would be the 100 people that were surveyed. So, all right, part B, doctors analyzed the MRIs of 38 professional boxers for possible brain injury. So in this case, we want to think what our population is, what our sample is. It might be easier to come up with a sample first because usually that's the first information you have. Like in example 1A, we had 100 people, which was our sample. In example B, the 38 professional boxers are going to be the sample. And then what would the population be for those 38 professional boxers? Well, we're specifying that they're professional boxers, so we probably don't want pro wrestlers or football players in this study, even though there's a risk of possible brain injury in those sports as well. So our population is going to be all professional boxers because we are limiting this study to 38 professional boxers. So we don't want to look at anyone who's still an amateur boxer or maybe somebody who plays a different sport that is also contact and at risk for possible brain injury. And then our sample would be the 38 professional boxers that we picked for this study. So, all right, that about does it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.